a company, Tesla, got $100 million in their Series A.
What is happening when AI learns is that it's learning from our observations.
They've case studied it, and some people have tested it. So graphs and charts, e-commerce product catalogs, design files and templates.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? Today is November 15th, 2024. You're listening and watching the Daily AI Show live, and today is our time every other week for us to slow down, look backwards, not really slow down, but look back at our last 2 weeks of shows and get back into some of these topics. Sometimes that's because we simply ran out of time. Sometimes that's because there's been new announcements. It's happened to us several times. We do the show 5 days a week. So where something literally hits the news, some random Bloomberg article comes out and it's quite literally about the thing we talked about the day before. And we go, oh, come on, that would have been perfect. Some new study comes out or whatever. So this is our opportunity every other Friday. We typically will say, hey, wait, what did we just talk about? What just happened in the last 2 weeks based on some of the show topics? And to have that conversation today, we have Karl, Andy, Beth, and I'm Brian. And I don't do this every time, but I do want to pull it up this time and just say, let's look back at, some of these conversations that we had over this week and last week. I wasn't here for the show yesterday, but the 5-year planning with AI. So I'm looking forward to if there's any additional conversations about that. Obviously, we talked about, I shouldn't say obviously, but entry-level job paradox. That was a really interesting show back on Tuesday. Monday, we had a more veterans-centric one. Last week, we were talking about ChatGPT versus Perplexity. That's been a hot topic, and there's always more to talk about there. What it's like to have an AI decision helper. And then there was some Harvard studies that had come out, not last week, but we talked about last week, where it was, talking about 2xing your students' ability to learn under certain circumstances. It was a small study. It only had, I think, if I remember right, 150 students. And we see that kind of with some of these studies. Very rarely do we see, 200,000 people in some sample set, have determined that AI is better at X, that whatever. It's typically these smaller studies, but I get it. It's usually done by, in this case, Harvard, but so, universities. There's probably limited resources. And then once you're factoring in for all the controls and all the bias and all that, it probably is very hard to get, 150 students that are going to work well for this particular study. So anyway, that's everything we sort of been talking about over the last week. Let me see, 1, 2, 4. Actually, I think I actually missed one too, because it would have been Monday's show. Can AI create knowledge? Sorry, that would have been last Monday's show on there as well. And what I'm noticing from that is I missed a few of the shows the last 2 weeks because I was not part of all those conversations. So who has something that they want to kind of jump back into, a topic that they're hungry to bring back up and talk about?
I don't know if it's a topic that we've ever covered, but I think yesterday, do we cover announcements here or do we just go back?
We can go, well, if it's, related to news and announcements and stuff like that. Otherwise, it would be next Wednesday. But sure, yeah. What do you got?
Because yesterday was pretty big, was the OpenAI launched their work with apps on macOS. So if you actually check if you have the desktop app for Mac, you probably saw a couple new features. One is the little button there that if you code, VS Code, text edit, Xcode, you can connect your code, your workspace to ChatGPT for desktop. So essentially, it can, at the moment, can see what you're doing. So I know our developers had just started using it, and they in ChatGPT they can go, hey, what do you see? And ChatGPT can see directly into the code base, directly into if you just use text edit, it can see. So for example, in my text edit, I was doing a demo yesterday, and the demo had what was it? Just a transcript. And I asked ChatGPT, what do you see? So that's part one. I think the big piece of that is not only can it see, but according to Ryan Morrison, I think who writes for Tom's Guide, he says that people inside, it's the first start of Another news, which someone else can go into, which is Operator, which seems like the OpenAI will be launching its own agents called Operator in January. So this could be the first start, because I want to read a little bit of what he says. The new updated app for macOS also comes with new user interface that puts the app connection and model selection in a new menu tab. Okay. So the true value isn't in what you can do now, although it is useful if you code, but what it means for the future. So imagine having a Zoom meeting in ChatGPT and being able to see the contents of the call and offer live tips on how to respond or interact meaningfully. Another potential useful area, which it's unfortunate Junmi is not here, is gaming. Picture the scenario. You are in a game of Fortnite and ChatGPT is running in the background. It watches your gameplay and can alert you in real time to any potential threats or offer tips on what to build. So you can read the entire article, but what it isn't just about coding, but it says here the next evolution of the feature will be to have ChatGPT interact directly with applications. This is a turning point where everyone can become a developer. Now, we've covered Bolt.new, or Replit, Cursor. So in ChatGPT, it can not only see your applications, but interact with them. So again, goes a little bit back to your OS is ChatGPT, and it can open and interact with any of these applications. And I would imagine it isn't just VS Code, it isn't just text edit, but it starts becoming Teams, Word, Docs, and really anything that could connect to it. So Ryan said here, you'll be able to ask ChatGPT to come up with a fun game for the iPhone. Let's say Flappy Penguin, and the AI will be able to write the code, open Xcode, implement its code suggestions, and even handle sending it to Apple for inclusion in the App Store. Your involvement is the initial idea, and any refinements all done using natural language, hence advanced voice mode. That's a way off, and we reach that point, it's more likely you talk to advanced voice, have it handle the code and functionality in the background, presenting you with a complete app report on screen. And he just ends with voice of the future of how we interact with these machines.
Yeah, this is very big news, and it's in the context of what we called 2024, which is about to wrap up, which is like the year of agents. And we forecast, and it had been forecast, we repeated the forecast, that there would be active agents driven by AI that become useful. And the first area where this happens is in coding. And it's not just OpenAI that has this capability. It was about a month ago that Anthropic launched Computer Use, which is a very similar kind of active agent within the coding process. Microsoft has their Copilot agents, and Google's Jarvis project these are all similar tools. And in coding, obviously, it's a very useful thing for the AI agent assistant to be able to see what you're doing on the screen and respond to that. And that takes the no-code AI assistant tools away from just you giving a natural language prompt and it generating code and you having to respond to that in the code, but allows for a more co-intelligent collaboration between the coding human and the agent. And this, then again, as Karl's saying, is going to extend to lots of different applications outside of coding as well. So agents are becoming a reality in coding. They're gonna leave that area. And Operator is the AI agent action that OpenAI is delivering. That's going to come in January, it's rumored.
And so I want to make a connection between this and something that we've heard lots of people be excited about, which is Siri being able to understand what's on your screen, right? And be able to communicate about that and interact with that. And that's something that when it's talked about, everybody's like, oh, wow, this is not quite that, but that level of excitement, right? If it can interact with these apps and it can understand what's happening on your screen, that's not very far behind. So I just want to toss that out there because it's really easy to understand in the phone thing. And so this is like that.
Yeah, we talked about that too, not this last 2 weeks, but how Apple Siri might be the gateway for a lot of people using more daily AI without maybe necessarily understanding it because it'd just be so easy to do. I will say, I know, Karl, you talked about it a little bit. Now that I finally have, I want to say it's 18.2 beta. I'm going to check that really quick and see if I'm saying that right. Software update. What am I up to?
This is on our phone, yeah.
Yeah, it's 18.2 is what I'm at. And it's beta. So I'm not sure if I have maybe slightly one more or whatever. My point to saying it though is just in checking that is that I finally now have most of what they promised with Apple Intelligence. And what surprised me right off the bat was that when I use Siri and I knew I had custom GPT, it just opened on my phone. And I knew I had ChatGPT as an availability.
You asked again. Your iPhone.
Sorry, guys. We'll call her Sarah or something now, so she doesn't kick off on everybody's. But when I asked Sarah, what shocked me was that I couldn't get it at first to go to ChatGPT to get the answer. But here's the reason: not that it was failing. Sarah kept answering the question correctly. And I was like, oh, we're all thinking about, like, we knew there would be upgrades to Sarah, and we knew there would be upgrades to it being able to access ChatGPT. But I will tell you, the first time it asked me, hey, do you want me to go to ChatGPT and go externally and do this? Wasn't actually just me saying, hey, so-and-so, help me with this thing, where it could have just pulled it from a Wikipedia, which it did many times, or it just gave me the correct source. It was never wrong, by the way. None of the information it gave me was wrong in the test that I did. What was interesting was when I did the new visual recognition, where you hold down the side button on the side of the phone and you pointed at something and you're like, basically, what is this? And so I was testing that around the house and showing my daughter. It was at that time that it recognized it and said it was just something hanging on my wall. It recognized it, said, this is what it is, and on the web, but also here's ChatGPT and here's more on that if you want to know about like the history of what you're looking at and stuff. Super, super cool. And it does bring in, even though it's manual at this point, right, Karl? Like, it does bring in this idea of, hey, what am I looking at? And that is just going to speed up, as we know, more and more, to the point where I don't want to say it's always on, but it'll probably be very easy for it to see a series of events on your phone and go, I can pick it up from here. I already know where you're going with this. And so through that, I think that the phone will be able to quickly connect the dots or finish the pattern, because it'll see where you started. It'll go, yeah, is this the path you wanted to take? Because I can go ahead and take it from here. There's no need for you to click in or go create this business.
So, Brian, I don't know if you saw the Apple Intelligence commercial. Did you see Apple's commercial on Apple Intelligence? So I showed you that, or
back a while.
No, I think Andy, I don't know if you saw it, but it showed this really lazy employee, and he was just doing nothing, and then had to send an email. The email was terrible, but all that person, it pressed like professional. I can't remember what it was, and then it sent to, I imagine, his manager, and his manager's like, someone wrote this really well, and looked at the guy who's like twirling his thing out of all the employees. So I don't know if, when you just said, oh, I'll take care of the rest, it's like, I'm praying that is not the future. Where we were talking about this too. It's like, will it make mediocre, mid, or really terrible workers, bring them up to the average? Because it can do all these. So let's take the email, for example. If I send an email and I don't know how to write properly, I'll just type professional and it'll go professional, send it, and it'll make it sound you're smarter or you're more professional than it is. So
isn't that already grammar and spell check? I mean, don't we already have that? And I think back to a quick firefighter story, but I think back to a chief I had who was the chief of our whole shift. So all of A shift, in that case, it would mean like 26 stations worth of people. Like everybody who was working that day as a firefighter, he was the boss of. Okay. So he happened to work in my station. I've mentioned that before. And he would fire off some stuff from his BlackBerry. We're going back to like 2004, 2005, right? He would fire off some stuff from his BlackBerry. And it was like really like mad. Like people messed up and he wanted us to know. But it never was lost on me that it was poor grammar. And so he was making this really strong point about something, but I couldn't see past the grammar. And I would just think to myself, I see what he's saying, but I can't take this seriously as much because this, and so like even back then, he had the ability to use a grammar check or a spelling check to make it punctuated correctly and whatever, because it was a really important thing he was saying. He definitely wanted this point to get across. Some people just fired it off. Some people took the extra 3 seconds to make it better. Like it makes a difference. So it's not that I think it'll make people better, but the assumption of what baseline is has risen. It's already risen. It's not like we have to wait for it. It's already there with AI. Go ahead, send out a mediocre email and wait to see if somebody goes, couldn't you have done like 30 seconds of work in ChatGPT and made that better? Like that's happening everywhere right now. I guarantee you there's bosses saying this all over the place now. Like, couldn't you spend 30 more seconds with this and like made this better?
I think this is a great show because there was a conversation, and we probably need to go into other news, but it was a conversation I had with someone in education saying, well, yeah, if students can do that, that's fantastic, but they are losing the ability to actually to learn how to write, there's more of that conversation that I think is like, it isn't just an email. I think it opens the door to the whole other thing about if you're rising the floor, but no one's actually learning how to do the base thing. That'd be a fascinating. Yeah.
Here's my pushback to that. My dad, when I was growing up, would get on my case nonstop about spelling. I just traditionally was not a great speller growing up. Still not a great speller. I don't have dyslexia, but I have something where my D's, B's, P's, anything with a line and a bump on it and a circle on it, I would write backwards. Not backwards, but in the wrong spot. I would put a B where a D was supposed to be. That's not dyslexia, but it's translated to when I used to type. So I would misspell stuff as a kid. And not to blame that. I could have gotten better. I was probably lazy as a kid too. My dad would be like, get in the dictionary, find it, right? Old school, figure out how to spell that word. And probably to his dismay, as I was rising through middle and high school, Spellcheck became ubiquitous in schools and everywhere else. And it was understood that you should definitely now use Spellcheck. So now the question comes, Karl, over time, did I become a better speller because of Spellcheck? Or would I have become a better speller by doing the traditional way? My pushback is that no, because of the AI tool, it's not Spellcheck, right? Predictive model, whatever, Spellcheck is technically that technology. I would say I became a better speller, not lazier. I didn't become worse because I would see the word replaced in front of me and I go, that's right. It's I before E after C, whatever, right? Whatever it is. Spell checking made me better as a speller, not lazier.
Would you say then that people will become better writers because AI will redo their entire work, not just writing, but able to research, comprehend, and put your own thoughts based on a set body of work into a coherent argument? I would say you don't. Like if AI could do that, fine, but like you're kind of losing that ability to look at a variety of sources and really understand how to digest that and put it in a way that is in your own voice and tone.
I think from like just real quick, just to be clear, I think where you went, Karl, with that was like I was talking about style, tone, formatting, and you jumped to like sort of critical thinking. And just to be clear, I'm not talking about critical thinking. I'm talking more about the style, tone, formatting. And what you first said was where I was going to say, yeah, I agree with that, which is if we're all looking at better, more polished versions of emails, we should also start naturally writing better, polished emails without the help of the AI. You're seeing better versions of it more often. You should be picking up on that without really even trying. Sorry, Beth.
And that is not what the data says. The data says that learning involves a certain amount of struggle, right? And one of the things that AI is doing for us is removing the struggle. There are ways to make that happen. And the Harvard study and the Harvard show that was all the way back on 2x your learning a week ago Tuesday. Just wanna say that as we're like diving deep into this. The other thing is that is we're speaking as people who speak English as a first language and grew up that way, and there are a whole bunch of leveler options for this for people who don't speak English as well. And if we imagine that whole conversation, except now we're talking about French or like Chinese, we're in that exact boat, right? Like, we're writing super broken stuff. Maybe not, Andy.
I know there's other topics on here and stuff, but like, I guess the way I look at that, Beth, is just my opinion that I've watched my wife be able to do better at learning French. My wife is already pretty good at language. She does a bit of German and Spanish. She picks up on them because she tries, frankly. She's intentional on learning, right? But she even uses AI, and I don't feel like it's pushing back and it's causing less struggle. I just feel like it's giving her, and this goes to our learning ones about, helping people learn 2 times faster, right? Right out of that show about AI learning. Yeah, that was a Harvard study, but the same concept. I don't know. I feel like
I think there's a role. I think there's a role for AI that is more like a coach in that process than what was shown on the very funny Apple Intelligence ad that Karl is referencing. Where it's worth looking at because it positions Apple Intelligence really as kind of a mask or disguise for a nitwit in your organization. So it's funny, but I'm not sure I would have approved that particular ad to, associate my AI intelligence with. I want to jump back just for a second to the whole idea of agents and where they're going. And this is in the space of coding. In this past week, there was a 100 million Series A. So a company, Tesla, got $100 million in their Series A. So an evaluation, by the way, almost at the unicorn level, $750 million. What they do is they provide an AI coding agent. But what's interesting is that this coding agent not only interacts with the developer in natural language and develops the code and launches the code and the application on the platform, but it then continuously maintains, updates dependencies as things change on the outside, addresses vulnerabilities, and optimizes the performance of the entire code base. And it integrates then with other coding assistants. So this agent can talk to Cursor eventually. That's how far agents are going. And that's another aspect of agency that we've talked about, which is, hey, my agent's going to talk to your agent, and they're going to work together in order to optimize the outcome between the entity that I represent and the entity that you represent.
So this starts to, for me, beg the question that we talked about a week ago Monday about new knowledge, because at the moment what is happening when AI learns is that it's learning from our observations and our interactions with things and the way that it's interpreting that. And we can see that we are very quickly moving toward AI having its own experiences, which then makes sense to me that this could come and start the development of new knowledge. And the other thing that we did not talk about in that show is what form the knowledge will take. We talked a little bit about that AI has more than 3 or 4 or 5 dimensions, right? Like AI has, I don't know that there's an end to the number of dimensions that AI has. And so is it that the new knowledge that AI will learn is AI specific knowledge? That it isn't shared knowledge, right? Our knowledge is then shared with AI, sort of, not the worldview, but that's coming. Yeah.
And there's an indication that the sort of the cutting edge of research in both synthetic data and in the development of a bypass of what could be called model collapse as a result of, the shortage of human-driven additions to the data corpus that's out there for training. The question that we, confronted in that show was, is AI able to generate new knowledge, or is it really just a repeater of whatever it is that we give it in its training? And so here's an interesting new little bit of news, which is a study from the University of Pittsburgh revealed that AI can now generate poetry that readers cannot distinguish from human written text, but actually prefer over legendary poets. So now that if you can demonstrate that AI can be creative in creative writing, then isn't this an analog for, hey, AIs can actually generate new knowledge? I would argue that a profound new poem that's better than what humans are writing, or stand side by side with what the very best poets are writing, that's new knowledge.
Well, to that end, I don't even know if this was a story in the last 2 weeks, but I read about it in the last 2 weeks. An AI painting, so a painting not generated like Midjourney, but actually painted, right? Went for $1 million in a Christie auction. And that sort of brings it back to like, okay, so we're still the arbiters of what's valuable and what's not. What is actual knowledge? What is actual art? What is any of those sorts of things? Although this seems like maybe an investment in like a first edition kind of, as opposed to this is an amazing artist.
Yeah, I mean, art is in the eye of the beholder, right? So,
so is the million.
Yeah, listen, I mean, I think it's cool that people are able to do that. I mean, obviously, we saw that with the NFTs and that kind of stuff as well. Like you said, is it a land grab? Is it this is the first? What was the first NFT? It was like of a screenshot of what's his face from Twitter, right? Or something like that. It was something random like that. And that was an NFT. They made a card out of it or whatever. And it was a one of one. And that sold right on. So I think I'm with you on this one, Beth, but also just back to what you're saying, Andy. If I don't think it necessarily has to be compared against human like poetry. I'm not some expert of poetry or art for that matter, or any of that. But my point to it is that as somebody who walks into a museum, I'm there because I want to see works of art, works of literature that move me. And who's to say that if you put me in a museum, I'm not going to know the difference? And you said, okay, Brian, the control is half of everything in this museum is AI generated. And half of it isn't. Half of it's world-renowned stuff. You're not going to know the difference. Like, right? Like, I'm going to walk in and I may say, this painting really speaks to me. It really, 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 I feel like I get it. Like Ferris Bueller. I'm just sitting there and staring at it, and it's AI generated. Does that make it any less powerful or valuable to me? No. I mean, I guess you could say like, oh, that wasn't created by human hand. And I go, but it's still powerful to me. So who's to say it's not impactful, or it's not net new knowledge, which you were saying, Andy, on there. I do want to pivot really quick and talk about Perplexity, if that's cool. I know, Karl, you said you have one or two things. I'll keep this one short because we talked about is ChatGPT search a Perplexity killer. We talked about that. 1, 2, 3, 4, like, what was that last week? Friday? I don't think I'm counting backwards to figure. I think it was last Friday. The reason I want to bring it up is because actually on Wednesday, I've been saying this sort of out loud. I'm teaching this course right now called the AI Powered Seller. And we're in week 5. Wednesday was week 5 of 6. And so in the first 2 weeks, I went deep into ChatGPT. The third week, I was in Perplexity. The fourth week, I was teaching sellers about Claude. Now, here we are in the 5th week, and I was starting to bring it all back together. Okay, I was like, okay, we've looked at these tools separately. Now let's start to look at them together. And one of the things I really came away with as I was teaching this and getting live feedback from people who are in the course saying like, this is sort of like eye-opening to them. So I wanted to bring it up on the show, is using one AI tool as a seed for another And so in my use case, what I was doing is there's custom GPTs that I built for sellers. One of them is called Help Me Book a Meeting With, and it's exactly what it sounds like. It helps you book a meeting with somebody, and you input stuff, the user input stuff like who it is, what the company is, and stuff like that. What I was showing them is like, hey, look, this custom GPT works. It takes a 45-minute process and it makes it a 3-minute process. This is the power of AI. You get something highly personalized at the end of it. But what I was showing them is like, look, you can go to Perplexity and ask questions. And then what I was showing them is the value of, I saw that was in Perplexity, it was doing the follow-up questions, which was actually enriching my initial seed data for the custom GPT. So in one instance, what I had was Perplexity seeded into ChatGPT, let the rest of the custom GPT run. And then I took that and actually went to Claude and had it write the emails. And so it doesn't necessarily take longer, but it's just this idea of using these tools for what they're really good at. And what I was showing them was like, hey, Perplexity is great, not only because you know what you want to ask, but look at these follow-up questions. They're immediate. You could just click on them. And then I was like, don't get fancy with this. Right click and drag. So everything highlighted in blue, copy directly over into the seeded part of the custom GPT, paste. Don't worry about formatting, and look what it can do for you. And they were just like, so I think it's just this good conversation to have about, when to use what tool. Yes, ChatGPT search, we talked about it on that tool, but I really do love the ability of Perplexity to keep the conversation going to a point where you go, this is a pretty good starting point. I'm going to take all of this and not limit ChatGPT and the custom GPT. I'm just simply going to give it more information and say, hey, go do your thing. It's just a cool way of using tools together. So I just wanted to bring that up since that was something that happened this week and got a lot of really good positive feedback from the people, the students that are in the class.
And just a little bit of behind the scenes for our shows. Often what happens is someone has a cool idea for a show. They go and have a conversation with Perplexity about it. They share that in our back channel, and then a show description, etc., gets written via custom GPT. So like we're walking our talk, everybody.
Yeah, sometimes just real quick on that too, Beth. Like, I don't know about you guys, because we don't really talk about this, but we'll talk about it publicly. But like, not everything rises to the surface. Sometimes I have an idea and I get in Perplexity and I'm fleshing it out rather, and realizing that it's actually not going to be a great topic. So sometimes the research kind of go, oh, well, I did have an idea there. It was a kernel, and I worked with Perplexity and I asked it and it had some suggestions or whatever. And ultimately I've just decided it's either too complex, it would be too worried, whatever the case is. And maybe this is a newsletter story. This isn't a whole show story. This is just a afterthought type of thing. Sorry, Karl, go ahead.
No, I'm still curious why. I've seen Aravind. I think there was a Perplexity. If a certain number of people at certain universities either signed up or something, the entire university gets Perplexity for free, which I thought that's an awesome way to just either one, get your product out, but two, it's like, this is one of the greatest AI research tools we have. And it's mind that more people either don't know about it or aren't leveraging what you can do, because it just pure research, what you can do with Perplexity is awesome. I just want to pivot to another news. It was really under the radar. I don't know if anyone's I saw anything about it. For all of us, I know prompting is a big piece of how we work, and Anthropic released their improve a prompt. It's in their dashboard, and essentially you take your prompt, you put it in, you see, hey, how do I want it to be improved? And then you run it. So I don't know if I can just quickly for a second. And
to be clear, this is available in Claude Console. So you would...
it's free too. So you just need to sign up and you'll get it. So I just put a prompt.
Share it one more time for me, Karl.
Pardon me?
Share it one more time for me, please.
What?
I can't see your screen. We can't see your screen on here.
Oh, you can't see my screen. Oh, okay.
Just unshare and reshare again.
2 admins, 1 kitchen.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Is that good? Okay. So it's like, I'm not sure what's going on.
Yeah. Issues.
So what you could do here is you take your prompt, I'm sure many of you listening, watching has a prompt that they use over and over again. And you do need a variable. And if you don't have a variable, it'll add a variable for you. But for this one, my prompt is to turn, this was an old prompt where I wanted to turn a podcast into a blog post, right? So I have my variable, which is the transcript equals, and I just said here simply, I want to improve the prompt so it can write in a way I want to include my brand. I just kind of made that up really quick. So it actually takes your prompt and creates, like, puts an output and then analyzes that output and then starts regenerating that prompt. And I only did it a couple times, but I thought this was, if you have a very complex prompt, not a bad way to have it redo. And it also has the ability to add, and this is what Anthropic says, the ability to add chain of thought into it, different types of elements into it. So I thought this is a really neat tool for those who have very complex prompts or prompts that they use over and over, something to say, hey, how can I improve it? And Anthropic really has something for you here. What's neat about this is, one, it has a prompt generator. So you can, ask what you're trying to do, and it would generate a prompt in a very comprehensive one. Then you can take that prompt and put it into improve the prompt, and it'll improve it for you. So I think this is, again, more complex. If you have something that you do over and over, not a bad way to get Anthropic to help you out. And I love this and the prompt generator, because sometimes how do I tackle this issue? How do I start my prompt? We all go through what we've gone through with Rachel's course and so on. But like, even then you're like, how do I start this perfect way to do it and then improve on it?
So I find the timing of this really interesting, and it makes me wonder what else is coming out, because Anthropic announced this yesterday, but it has been available for weeks. I have been using it for many weeks. And so when you go into the console, when you use the console on a regular basis, it's been saying, would you like to improve the prompt? So I find it really interesting that it was announced yesterday. And it just makes me wonder, like, what intel do you have that somebody else is announcing something and you wanted to say this? Because, like, they've been having this in their back pocket, maybe? I don't know. Like, it's very...
No one's using it? I mean, no one is using it. No one uses it, right? Like, unless you say it. It's interesting that Anthropic just drops this kind of like, hey, casually here. I was like, this is an amazing use
right.
for a lot of people, but it's just, oh, we have this. It's like, oh, okay,
right.
Cool. But this would be amazing for anyone who's just starting out, which is a lot of people.
And I will say, I don't know this, as I'm going to go definitely test this out, because I like their, I like Claude's prompt builder. What I will say from at least my own experience is that it's not a one-to-one, prompting for ChatGPT. Claude is actually, I would say, a little bit more advanced with their ability to hold things in like a virtual memory while they're doing it. They call it their not sandbox, but their scratch pad. Like, if you try to use the same scratch pad, at least in my experience, and maybe some of these work through this, but in my experience, if you try to use the same idea of a scratch pad, and basically what Claude is doing is it's saying, oh, hold on a second, let me go put this on the scratch pad, like where you would have your virtual notepad. Let me work through this really quick. Cool. And then it comes right back in, but you don't need to see what was on the scratch pad. It's like the actual critical thinking going on behind it, or the chain of thought thinking. And Claude's been able to do that for a really long time. If you try to get ChatGPT to do that inside like a custom GPT, it falls on its face. It doesn't really understand how to work with the idea of a scratch pad. So I don't know this. I'm really excited to look at this though, Karl, and just compare and contrast. The only thing I am concerned about, like in looking at it going through the process, is it looks like you went through about 6 different steps, which is great. But what if it takes a left turn at Albuquerque on step 2 and there should have been a human in the loop there to course correct? So I'll be interested to see how different like one of my custom GPTs is or something like that after going through the 6 steps. Or if I'm like, oh, I bet you step 3 would have been fine. We should have stopped there. And it kept iterating over the top of that. Excuse me. That's a good example of wanting to have a human in the loop sometimes. So that'll be interesting to test.
Well, it's interesting because the steps that it goes through is that it's looking at it slightly differently. And it's step 2 or step 3. You can see that it's building a visual. Now, it doesn't actually go to the visual, but it's building the process map of what the prompt, what you're asking it to go through, the steps. And you could take that and put it into mermaid.live and see the process map that it's talking about. It's just one of the things that it shows you that it builds. But if the prompt is not successful, right, you wish you had stopped, you can edit the instructions again.
Okay.
Like, oh, no. And you can automatically take it into the console where you can, no, not the console, the playground, whatever it says. Take it somewhere. Workbench, maybe, is what it calls it.
I want to point out that prompts are different and not translatable sometimes from one platform to another. So Claude prompts, there's a certain methodology that you'll develop and have to understand in order to optimize that. Now you don't have to because Claude's going to improve your prompt, but it's improving the prompt for Claude. It's not improving the prompt necessarily for GPTs. So I'm a little nervous about it, but I'm going to do this experiment. I have some public custom GPTs that have really like now outdated structured prompts that I built a long time ago.
Yeah.
I'm going to take them over to Claude, ask Claude to improve it, and then put it back into the custom GPT and see what happens. It could be that it does in fact improve a custom GPT's performance or regularity. However, I'll note that often I will, in using one of my own custom GPTs, I'll, in the conversation, not in the instruction, I'll say, look, you don't need to do X, Y, and Z anymore. Do it this way. And it says, okay, got it. And I'll say, do you need to change your instructions? Or do I need to change your instructions to ensure that this persists? And it's told me no. It's remembering instructions from the user that in effect are something that's not an obvious feature of custom GPTs, but actually works.
Yeah, I'm with you. I can't wait to use it and work more on it. So that's gonna be interesting.
And this is a really good point for evaluations. If your custom GPT is working, you don't need to improve it just to test whether it will improve, right? We're going to do it because we're the Daily AS.
We just do it.
For the people that we're talking about, like, oh, I want to try this out. If it's working for you, you don't have to do anything. There are also some across the board, and little shout out to Rob Lennon's Core Reactor course. When I'm improving prompts, I am actually getting them to work in ChatGPT, Anthropic, and the only reason that they're not working in Gemini isn't that they didn't understand the prompt. They just don't feel like they have to follow it as closely as the other models, which is just Gemini.
Yeah. Gemini's like, I don't think you're asking me, but I feel like I'm just going to go do this instead.
Right. Like it gets to a place and then it's like, yada, yada, yada. I'm like, no yada.
No, yeah. Can I jump to one thing? I was attended a webinar, a little bit different. We don't talk too much about this company here. It's called Cohere. It's a Canadian company. They deal specifically with enterprises. Has their own LLM, Command R. In the grand scheme of things, it's not like on the highest, but it's all in the same kind of piece here. They introduced multimodal embed powering AI search. Now, why is that important? If you have, chatbots trained on, let's say, PDFs. The hard thing about PDFs is most of the models take the text but can't really review the images. Now, Claude, actually, funny enough, came out with PDF Visual, which actually can see the image. What's neat about multimodal embed, and I was listening to the webinar, how even with visual, with Sonnet 3.5 visual PDF, there is still a preference on text. There isn't a balance, according to them. What they've come up with is their multimodal model. Actually, it isn't separated between text and image. It's combined. So you can just ask it anything and it would not prefer text when it responds. It's equal. And what they released was AI search. So for example, if you are a company or a business that has thousands of images, graphs, and you're trying to find them, and you have to pay for a damn system, but you still have to label them, this thing, and we built some tests on this because we've worked in some businesses that have hundreds or thousands of those images. It does pretty well, where you just there's one company that we were looking for hippopotamus riding a train, and it would come up, and we're like, that's pretty amazing. And they would come up with all these hippopotamus, and then be like starfish, and it'll come up with all the images, let's say 85%, 90% accurate. That's not a bad thing when a lot of the work for businesses is the whole point of labeling every single image so that, adding the metadata in. This thing, don't need it. Just needs it's an API. You can build it in and it's run through Microsoft Azure too, but you can take that API and apply it. And we've tested it. It's a pretty awesome thing. And I'm loving the multimodal equal where it can read both image and text from PDFs.
Yeah, that sounds awesome, man. So you mentioned, you kind of talked about it, like, you said DAM system. For anybody that doesn't know, digital asset management. When you think about, I had somebody explain this to me because they were in this industry, and they're like, Brian, just think about how many pieces of digital content a basic influencer would have to be responsible for. Let's say they're working with 3 or 4 different brands. They all have different rules. They all have asset management. Like it multiplies so quickly that it becomes a real fear that the wrong A/B split test with the wrong, color and words and hippopotamus riding a train go out, right? That you use the correct one because there's so many rules. So what you're saying, Karl, is like so valuable to so many people that if it really does look at it equally and it can pull the text or could pull the image and make sense of that and comprehend the whole, I think for marketing agencies that or just marketing in general that have thousands upon thousands of digital assets, this is a huge game changer for them if they're able just to search naturally for the right piece in there, along with the metadata and things they should be doing anyway, right? But finding that single source of truth is a needle on a haystack, quite literally,
Well, they mentioned, so a couple of things that, they've case studied it and some people have tested it. So graphs and charts, e-commerce product catalogs, design files and templates. That's, how many businesses have one of those 3? Graphs and charts, pretty much all businesses have some sort of graphs and charts that we've tried to find. And you're like, I did this like 6 months ago, 3, I cannot literally find what I'm looking for. Same thing with product catalogs. And just design files and templates alone, I can just imagine any creative shop, any marketing shop has thousands of these things that is just sitting in Dropbox or local servers, just sitting there. Yeah. And no one will ever see it.
Well, let's wrap it up there for the week. Thanks to everybody hanging out in the comments. Don't forget, you can go to thedailyishow.com and check back for any of the episodes we were mentioning on this show, but of course, all the ones before it. This is episode 335. So we're moving right along this year. We'll have 5 new episodes for you next week and every week thereafter. You could also sign up for our newsletter at that website, thedailyishow.com. I can go ahead and throw this on really quick. So if you want to go and you want to click on that that QR code, it'll take you directly there. The newsletters go out every Sunday. The list is growing week over week, and we have a lot of fun putting it together. So if you like what we're talking about on the live show, whether you're catching us live or on the replays on any of the services, if you'd like to get more of this type of information, type of content, that's what the newsletter is for. It's for us to take a different level of approach to it, bring up other topics that aren't necessarily full shows, but still stuff that we think are really interesting. And our collective group, is talking about in the back channels of Slack and other places. So if that's interesting to you, go ahead and check out thedailyishow.com. With that, we'll say goodbye. Have a great weekend, and we will see you again next week for 5 more shows all talking about AI. Can't wait. See you guys then.